Hello, everybody. Welcome to Boswell Book Company. It is day 5,108 of us being in business. Woohoo. We are very honored to welcome back. And at this point, I can't remember what you've done in person and what you've done virtually, but I feel like maybe this is your second in person.
That's right. This is only my second one.
Though the virtuals count and they're easy to record, so we like those too. Erica Ruth Neubauer for her fourth Jane Wunderly novel. She is the Agatha award-winning author of the series, as well as an Anthony Award and Lefty Award finalist. She's been a reviewer of mysteries and crime fiction for publications such as PW and Mystery Scene. She's a member of Sisters of Crime and Mystery Writers of America. She is a military veteran. Thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
You're supposed to say it's an honor to serve.
It was an honor to serve, Daniel. It was an honor to serve.
A former worked with police. She has a detective's license. She has taught, and being that I work in retail, she doesn't put this officially on anything. She's also worked retail. So welcome. It's important for me. Thank you for your service there too. But
It was an honor to serve in retail.
So I'd love for you to start out giving sort of, don't read, please. But give,
Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to say a few words to sort of like an opening salvo?
Sure. So Intrigue in Istanbul is set in Istanbul. But it's also set in Budapest, or outside Budapest, towards the end of the book. In this one, it's a little bit of an homage to Indiana Jones, which were movies that I absolutely loved as a kid. So in this book, Jane is on the hunt for her father, who has remortgaged their home, taken the money, and run to Istanbul. And he's in search of a historical artifact, which is the Sultan's heart. And that is a real thing that I learned about on the Discovery Channel. And they are actually looking for it. They're still digging for it. It's never been found. So Sultan Suleiman, back in, I'm terrible with numbers, I think the 1400s, he was killed on the battlefield and his organs were removed and buried, but his body was removed back to Istanbul, but his heart and the other organs have never been found. And they believe now that they're buried beneath a winery.
Can I just ask, did you happen to be watching the Discovery Channel and thought, well, this is a book?
Yeah.
Or yes. So
Yes, actually.
So I'm just hoping that you don't watch a lot of like TLC.
I do not.
Oh, good. The other thing I was going to ask you on that realm was, so yes, it's been it is our pitch, or our the Indiana Jones angle on the book. Did you come up with the angle first and then, or did the plot sort of naturally lead you into, hey, and then adjust things so that it was more of a sort of a classic movie serial chase sort of thing?
I think it actually came about because I knew at the end of the third book that they were going to want to meet her father.
Mhm.
And so then I was inspired to be like, oh, I could do this like Indiana Jones style where they're supposed to meet her father, but now he's gone. And so now the chase is to find him. And so that came first. And then I was looking for an artifact that would be cool, like a fun thing to research, because when you're researching, it takes a long time, and it should be something super interesting. So that's when I was watching the Discovery Channel and stumbled across that, and I was like, yes, that is the thing.
Did you have any other like tossed out artifacts?
There was an interesting thing that had been found in Greece, and I can't remember the specifics of it, but it was a weird box, and it was found in a shipwreck, and it had hieroglyphic Egyptian symbols written on it. And I thought that would have been kind of a cool tie back to Mina House.
Right.
But the Sultan's heart really spoke to me.
It is grosser.
It is, and I will say when they sent me the book cover, there's like a jewel on the front, and I did email my editor and I said, so it's not a jewel, the heart that they're looking. It's a mummified heart, but I realized that is a lot less aesthetically pleasing. So the jewel stayed.
Any person who follows your career knows that when we talk about planning or pantsing, you are adamant about your pantsing. So you are wearing a very nice, different non-pants outfit.
This is a non-pants outfit, but I am a pantser. I do not know what is going to happen day to day when I'm writing. Like the first book, I didn't know who did it until about 2/3 of the way through. And then I was like, oh, could that guy have done it? I think he did do it. And I looked back and I was like, oh yeah, no, that totally is who did it.
Did you have to change? Then did you go back and change stuff?
I only had to change a couple of things. Yeah.
Power of the subconscious.
The power of the subconscious. Yeah. With this one, I completely changed who did it on a second draft. I didn't like who I had and added a whole new character and so there is a lot of reorganization and rewriting when you're a pantser because sometimes stuff just doesn't
I really feel like it, especially in this particular genre, like it gives you the sense of surprise. Like I feel like if somebody knows all along what they're doing, it might be harder for the reader to not know what's going on.
Yes. And I tried outlining once and I just hated it. It just was so hard to write to an out. I much prefer being surprised when I sit down.
I love the idea of, because I know you go to a lot of mystery conferences. Do they have like pants versus planning kind of like debates or competitions where it's on one side of the
I don't know if there's competition.
Prize money.
I mean, maybe in the bar.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But the people are pretty, I know there are a lot of planners in mystery and other genres too, and they can be very almost evangelical about it. Like, how dare you not plan this book out?
No.
So do you fight with them or do you just pretend?
It just you do you.
One of the things that's really fun about a series is that you have characters that continue through the series, and you've really given get a chance to have the characters grow in the story. Would you like to talk about sort of like your process of like what you plan to do with the character? I don't think I'm giving anything away because you are reading it for mystery, but it feels like the Redvers, the romance is sort of on level. It doesn't really take a big turn in this book.
No, it doesn't.
So do you feel like, do you know where, like I know you've got thoughts ahead, and I know you, on the other hand, you don't plan it, but you must be, it's very contradictory in my head. I'm wrapping my head around it, but do you feel like you know what direction that's going in?
I do.
Or will that surprise us?
So if you're looking for, I know there's not a ton of romance in this one. There is a Christmas novella coming out in October. And there is some more romance in that. Okay. And then I do have a draft of the 5th book, and so there is planned what happens.
Okay, very good. I actually feel, and not to give away anything once again, but I feel like maybe the big character development is with Aunt Millie in this book, I think, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think it was more about her relationship with her dad and her sort of memories of her mom is more what I was focused on.
Yeah, so a parental thing. Well, it's true because we really don't know much about her dad, anything about her dad, a little, up until now.
Yeah.
And what were you hoping to do with that, like in terms of how it will affect Jane as a character, like in terms of us learning more about her parents? Were you thinking about that at all? Or you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Who cares?
Hey,
parents.
I wasn't really, I kind of knew that was what I wanted to do for her in this one, but I didn't really think about it a whole lot beyond that.
Yeah. Okay.
Pantser, Daniel.
Oh, fine. I'll answer for you. This is what you were trying to do. No, all I could think about was when and my rule of thumb is anything before page 50 is not a spoiler.
Okay,
So,
that's fair.
and I might even go, I need a number. So I'm very number driven. And so I feel like you can it could go in the flat copy, so to speak, or in a review. And so one of the things we learn is that they go to Boston to find
Yes.
and her dad has disappeared.
Yes.
And also way before page 50, we learn that he has taken out a loan for $90,000. And I thought to myself, $90,000 in 1926, that must be an enormous sum of money.
Yeah.
I was asking, are there any loan officers or mortgage bankers or mortgage, like, what was that?
Just a lot. Just
No,
a
it's
lot
just a
of
whole
money, you
bunch of money.
guys.
So I'm just saying the stakes are very high here. So, and that the where they live sounds awfully cute. So I wouldn't want to lose it either, even though she seemed to be interested in it.
No, but I think all of her memories of her mom are tied up with that townhouse.
Yeah,
It's in a very cute part of Boston.
very cute. Did
Yeah.
you do?
I did
I-
not go to Boston, but I have been to Boston many, many times because
Right.
my best friend was a librarian there. And we have been in that neighborhood.
Oh, good. I'm glad. One of the things people really love about this series is how placey it is. And you really do a terrific job making me want to go to Istanbul. Would you talk about some of, your research for that and what you wanted to include?
It was a last minute trip. Actually right after the war in Ukraine broke out, and we knew that was getting kind of close. So my ex-husband and I were like, well, we should go now. So we went the following weekend and we just flew out for a long weekend, and it was fantastic. I didn't know that it snowed in Istanbul, and it does. And it was end of March. And it looked like Wisconsin. But it was a city that I really needed to go to, and I did a lot of revisions when I came home for Istanbul. It was a city I really needed to experience. It's such a cool place. The architecture is amazing. There's so many hills, which I guess I didn't expect. It's a really hilly city. Yeah, it's beautiful. The coffee is so thick, and then it the ground's against your teeth at the end.
Rachel did say
good.
to me, why aren't we serving Turkish coffee at this? Is there any place in Milwaukee? And feel free to chime in. Is there any place you really, it is a very visceral
It is
experience.
really visceral.
And I would like to try it. So what's the closest place to get Turkish coffee?
I do not even know.
Tell me later. And the other thing is I do have
Hello.
okay, excellent. Very convenient.
I'm also fell in love with baklava. I also bought a rug. I definitely did get talked into buying a rug, no regrets. But they were so kind, and afterwards I was actually working on the novel, and they were like, you've bought a rug from us, now you're family. And they let me sit upstairs, and they kept bringing me cups of Turkish coffee while I sat and wrote in their rug shop. And so I made them their characters in this book.
Oh, we actually, speaking of characters in this book, so we got,
You can name drop.
I can drop. So Michael Dillman called and needed a copy of the book. And he has a body, which you won't remember. But how did he get in the book?
Michael Dillon I met years ago, I think at the mystery bookstore that used to be in town, and he really loves to be killed in books. So I obliged.
So if people want to be murdered in your books, how can they contact you?
Through my website, it's fine.
Excellent. And can you, if they say, please, brutal.
I try not to kill people super brutally.
Well, I don't think this is that kind of genre.
This is not that kind
This
of book.
is a little, as we say, Mary Higgins Clark,
Yeah.
off-screen bodies. I think there's a lot of homage. It felt like even more, I think in the past we've talked about the books as being sort of, masterpiece mystery, the PBS series being a lot of inspiration for you. I felt like there might have been a little more Agatha Christie in this one.
There was partly because part of this takes place at the Para Palace Hotel, which I did go to. I didn't stay there. It was really expensive, but I did go there. And they claim that Agatha Christie wrote, I believe, Murder on the Orient Express in room 410 there. I don't know if it's true or not, but they claim that she wrote it there. And there's a whole homage to her actually in the hotel. So that was super cool. And also I knew that the fastest way to get from point A to point B in this book was to put them on the Orient Express. And I really felt like I had to nod to Agatha Christie because, I mean.
Well, you mentioned in the notes, which you kind of, it's after page 50, but I'm allowed to talk about it. So you mentioned that you had to do a couple of tweaks, and this isn't even considered, it's a historical mystery, so there should be plenty of tweaks but can you tell, I thought it was really interesting. So
I believe she hadn't actually traveled on the Orient Express until a couple of years after this takes place.
So there. So I was going to say, I also found it very interesting that you talked a lot about not just the food and we have pictures of the Para Palace at the front, which I was going to bring back and I forgot. But it is very beautiful, and if you couldn't, I couldn't afford it either. But I thought it was interesting when you talked about the time period you said it in, which was a year after the Ataturk reforms, and how that affected the Redvers and Jane's experience of Istanbul. Would you talk a little about that?
And it made it really difficult to research, actually, because there were so many changes going on. Ataturk had taken over and was trying to modernize Turkey. So like there was a lot more modern dress. There was a lot, like, the name hadn't changed yet, but people were already calling it Istanbul instead of Constantinople. There was so much upheaval that it was really difficult to kind of pin down what was historically correct. And also I've completely lost my train of thought.
Well, you said that actually, in the notes you said that people would often call it Istanbul.
Yeah, like Hemingway actually has a couple of references to Istanbul because he traveled to it in the early 1900s and he called it Stambul. And like that's a term that people used also. So they called it a lot of different things. Oh, I was gonna say there was a lot of also white Russians had come in after that revolution. So there's a whole influx of like immigrants from here and there. And it was really socially a really turbulent time.
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned for one, like they expected to see the fezzes that they saw in Egypt or which would be called something else there, but that that Ataturk
he'd outlawed them.
Outlawed fezzes,
yeah.
And also women were uncovered.
Yes.
And, yeah, that was a really interesting time. And it also reminded me of now the way Russians have sort of fled the country. There was just a big article about Russians on Bali.
Yeah.
So it reminded me of the Russians being all over Istanbul at the time.
Even when we were there, like there was an influx of
Russians.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that I was going to mention is I was going to mention the Orient Express, which we already talked about.
That was also difficult to research because there were so many iterations of it, especially after the war.
Yeah.
That it was really also hard to pin down exactly what the train might have looked like.
How much do you get, having now done several of these books and also been a critic yourself, how much does historical accuracy in mysteries, like, do you get taken to task? And would somebody say, well, that was clearly the wrong model of train that you used?
Have not had that happen yet. Fingers crossed.
Well, I would think you should start preparing your comeback line. Because it's really never too early for that. And I'm not sure if Rachel is going to talk about this herself, but she did had a question from the Peanut Gallery about 20s outfits, and what made you decide that this series was going to be in the 1920s? And did you understand that if you wore a dress based on the time period that it would look so odd?
Yes to all that. So I struggle with the clothes of the 20s because unless you're built like a lollipop, they just didn't look good on you. They didn't look good on women with figures. And so I think in the first book, I specifically, Jane will not wear one of the girdles because she just won't. But that drop waist just does not look good on people who have hips. So I do struggle with that when writing about and obviously I would love to wear some 20s clothing to these events, but it's not going to happen. But I chose the 20s, because it's so evocative. It's so easy when you say the 1920s, you immediately picture, flappers and cocktails and prohibition and all of those things. And also because my dad raised me on old black and white movies, and on Masterpiece Mystery and Agatha Christie. And so somewhere along the way, I picked up very romantic ideas about the 1920s, specifically in Egypt. People elegantly dressed and sipping their cocktails in a slow fan overhead, and then there's like a dead body in the corner. And so when I sat down to write my first book, that was absolutely the setting that I was going to use. But I knew I couldn't keep it in Egypt because I could never do what Elizabeth Peters did with the Amelia Peabody series. And because I love to travel, I was like, I could just move it around from place to place, and it's an excuse to go places.
Well, and I believe it's not a secret where you're going next.
It is not. The next one is set on the Isle of Iona. It's in the Outer Hebrides in Scotland.
And who knows after that? I think it's
you
fair
do.
to say. Yeah, I know, but if it isn't said by the author, it isn't said. Curious about editing. One of the things that you have mentioned is that you both use a freelance editor and then the publishing editor. Now, what is your thought process as to why you want to go through multiple editing processes?
Because I want it to be the best book it could possibly be. And I stay with my freelance editor, even though I have an editor at my publishing house, but my freelance editor and I have worked together since before I had an agent or a publisher. And we worked really well together. Yeah. And on the last 3 books, my publisher didn't have any changes for me because I'd gone through extensive editing with my freelance editor.
When you're and we know the pants thing, but in the editing process, it sounds like there are some changes with your freelance editor. Do you tend to underwrite or overwrite? Do you wind up adding or taking things out? And do you want to mention, not in this book because none of you have read it, but since you've all read the first 3, I'm sure, would you like to mention any interesting changes from previous books that people would go,
I don't know if I have any of those. I actually underwrite. So my first drafts are super short. And then I put in a lot of describe this, figure out what this is. And then when I come back and edit, I'm like, oh, Erica, really? But then that's where I add in all the description and all of the, a lot of the character development and that kind of stuff. So my first drafts are really just plot and dialogue. And I just like to get it out onto the page.
Does that also mean a lot of the historical detail comes later?
A lot of the historical detail comes later. And I like to write the draft before I travel to a place because I don't know what I don't know until I've written it. And that way I can make a list of what I need to research, the places I need to go and look at.
That could be like a little thing you put on a tapestry or something. I don't know. Could you repeat that?
I will embroider that on the pillow. I don't know what I don't know what I don't know until I've written it.
Okay. Yeah. Good. So you can't think. There hasn't been characters are there characters that you didn't expect would have such a major role in the series? Did you always know?
I almost killed Aunt Millie in the first book.
This is what I was waiting for.
I had no idea that people were going to love her so much. I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah, no, I would say she adds a lot to the story.
She's based on my grandmother.
Oh.
What? Grandma Lois was a pot stirrer. She liked to stir things up, just like Aunt Millie.
Well, I might have other questions, but I'm going to throw it out to folks. I'm going to repeat your question just because we're recording and they won't hear you. So do you have any questions? Susie, I had talked about Jane going to Chicago and having a crossover.
I know.
I
think that Susie Calkins and I should write a novel together.
Sure, you're not against it.
I'm not against it.
Okay, good. Other questions? All right, keep going. Oh.
love Christmas. I love Halloween, but I really love Christmas too. So I actually pitched it to my publisher and they were like, "Are you sure you want to do this? It's kind of a lot of work." And I was like, "Yeah, but I really do. I just thought it would be really fun to write a murder mystery, a short murder mystery with sleighs and snow and the whole thing set at Christmas."
Do you think it's going to be a physical book or an ebook only?
It's going to be ebook only. I really tried to talk them into printing it and I did not win.
Christmas novels are very popular.
I know.
We have just tables of them.
I'm gonna readdress it.
It'd probably have to be longer though.
It's 40,000 words.
I don't know what that means.
It's half of it's literally half of that.
Okay.
This is
Yeah. When you think Robin Cook, is it that Robin Cook?
What?
In the acknowledgements, is the Robin Cook the Robin Cook?
I don't think so.
Okay, good. Different Robin Cook. Well, that's my questions.
Sorry. So the book 5 has a real occult bent. It's also based on a real case that happened in the 1920s on the Isle of Iona. This woman was found dead on top of the moor, and she had carved a cross in the ground, and she was naked and had little scratches all over her body. It was really weird, and she was in this occult group that W.B. Yeats was also in randomly. I know. I wrote William Butler Yeats into this book. I had to. It was right there. So yeah, this has an occult bent. I believe that book 6, I'm doing research right now. I think book 6 is going to be in New Orleans. And so I think that will probably have to have a ghosty. And
So
cemetery.
what book won't have ghosts in it is the question going forward. Oh,
Thank you. Which I think would be appropriate for that
actually, yeah,
neighborhood.
that is appropriate. Yeah.
I believe that I will, especially if I start doing a novel. If I start making it so it's one novel per year, then we would move pretty quickly into the 30s because this one's 27.
How is it moving along so far? How many? Like
First 3 were all in 26. This one's
Oh.
in 27. So this is going to start moving a little quicker, I think.
Okay. If people don't know, Rachel often sews outfits to match the book's events that she does. So you should always compliment her clothing. So
Her dress is so cute today.
it is very cute. Other questions? Oh, hi. All right, wait. We have to say, I have to record that. Philip Kerr plants historical mistakes to catch the complainers. Now your question.
I think we're all stealing that. Oh man, no, because I honestly, once I've written it and then it's published, like I kind of don't remember what happens. I had to go back and look up information about her dad, and I was like, what did I name him? Does he have a name? I had to do like a Word document search.
Always remember that Ethel Mertz had 3 middle names. Depending on the episode. Who cares?
So no, like I have definitely written them into corners and then had to like do that. Always comes out in editing. My editor is very good at keeping track of me.
Do you keep like a little either on the computer somewhere of like things you have written about characters so far? Have you put kind of Jane's world in some sort of
I have some
board
things
game
written
format?
down.
Yeah.
I have some things written down to keep track of.
Yeah.
I probably should have started a Bible. What's what they call it at the outset of this, and I didn't do it.
It's never too late. And you know, if somebody is a particularly aggressive fan, you could get them to do it.
Any takers?
they wouldn't be here. Any other questions? Where? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Fun and not fun parts of having a editing editor and a publishing editor. I think I would say editing is always hard. I mean, you have to keep in mind that this is a business and that like they're going to sell books. And so anything that they say that you've done wrong or not well, and it's to make it better.
We were talking about, how
earlier.
It's just not hard. It's never easy to be told,
Like,
unless you say to them, this isn't working, help me. Like if you ask a leading question, that's not that hard.
Yes.
But when you're like, this is pretty great, and then they're like,
yeah, it's always hard to read the editorial letter where sometimes it's like, 7-8 pages of like, this isn't right. And then I always have to put it away for a couple of days and be like, okay. And then come back to it and read it. And they're always right. It's always things that does need to change. But it just takes me a couple of days to process it.
It does make you wonder when somebody takes 10 years to write a book and you're like, maybe they've been sitting on that editorial letter for a long time.
I wouldn't blame them.
It's tough. Oh, go ahead.
Yes. So I had a lot of careers. I was really busy in my 20s. It was always kind of my secret dream to write a book. I just never sat down and did it. Until I became a reviewer and started going to mystery conferences. And it was actually when I saw an interview at Left Coast Crime where I saw someone interview Sue Grafton. And she was talking about how she had 8 books in the drawer that were never going to be published that she had written before she got her first book published. And that really stuck with me. And I thought, well, shit, if Sue Grafton can write 8 books that never got published, like I could just try it. Like I could just sit down and try. And so that's when I decided to just sit down and do it. And I had been the idea had been percolating for a while, Egypt and these characters. So yeah, then I just kind of sat down and did it.
Are you saying you don't have any books in the drawer? This was your first?
This is my first.
I think that's unusual just for people. If you're thinking, why didn't it's okay to write another one if the first one doesn't. In fact, you probably should.
Yeah.
But kudos. So
Thanks,
that's
man.
cool.
Yes, I actually just turned in something to my agent, and so fingers crossed that will find a home someday. Yeah.
Greg.
At least a year. It takes me probably 2 months to write a first draft. I put it away for a month and then I come back and probably takes me another 6 weeks to do editing. But then it goes through so many other processes. It goes through, my editor at the publishing house, then it goes through a copy editor, then it goes through, then I get the pass pages, and then it goes into production. So I would say at least a year from writing it to probably a year and a half to it coming out. Okay.
So you're going to do the encyclopedia of Jane for us?
Thank you, Carrie.
Can you talk a little bit about the value or importance of the writing getaways that you do?
Oh, I think both the writing getaways and I think also the conferences are hugely important because I think it's, for me at least, it's super inspiring to spend time with other writers and bounce around ideas or talk about, the nitty gritties of the business or just writing. I think it's really inspiring. I always come away with like a big creative push afterwards, wanting to like get stuff down on the paper and so I think those are hugely important. I get to look at them before they come out, but not really.
It has been said by other authors, very few people have, you have to be a pretty big name to have like real cover direction. What people often get is they'll get a few covers to look at, and 2 of them will be really terrible and 1 will be pretty good. And
I don't even get that. They just send it to me and they're like, this is what it is. And I'm like, it's great.
I've heard of various authors having really struggling with it. But a lot of most authors feel like they're pretty lucky and they do a pretty good job. I think nowadays cover artists are doing a good job. Here's to cover artists. Any other questions? Oh, go ahead.
We do things by Zoom and over email as well. She's not in town. She lives in California. I actually know her from mystery conferences.
I would suggest probably, I'm surprised by, I'd love to see more people doing books on their own, use a freelance editor. It certainly, it sounds like it's been really great for you.
It has, and she's fantastic. She's really good at her job.
So references later. If you need,
Exactly.
you need an editor. Is she booked, always booked? Is she
She's
hard to
pretty
get
booked
in?
out, but
Yeah,
if
that's
someone
right.
is looking,
I was afraid of that.
Yeah.
So sorry. I think maybe one more question if we have one. Go ahead.
I don't know if there's more writers doing it,
I
Daniel.
think it seems pretty consistent to me. It's been a genre that's always been popular. I think the difference is there's always more history. It's an interesting time for mysteries, I think, just because I always wonder about the growth in others. Romance has exploded, horror has exploded, fantasy has exploded. Reading hasn't exploded. It's just people are still reading, sure, but there's probably more and more like where are those readers coming from who are reading that? Definitely it feels like some of them are coming over from general fiction. But it's hard to say. We never really see numbers on that sort of thing. But there certainly are still publishing it, so that's good. I have another question for you, which is about your shirts. How are you doing your big, amazing shirt giveaway?
I didn't think there was gonna be this many people here.
Ah,
I have some shirts. They're like various weird sizes. So, if you get up there and there's one in your size, it's yours.
this is quite competitive.
I know. I don't know what to say.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We are going to be signing at the front of the store copies of the new book. This is an ARC, but I'm buying a finished copy. Intrigue in Istanbul is available, as are the first 3 books in the series. I want to thank you for continued success and looking forward to number 5. And thanks everybody for coming. We wouldn't have a bookstore without you.
And Daniel, thank you for stepping in and interviewing me today.
It's an honor.